How I brainwashed myself to success to become a self-made millionaire. And no, I won't be using the word manifestation in this video. Not that I don't believe in it, but there's a stigma around it. And I want to make sure that when you finish this video, you are getting tactical strategies that you can put into practice today to start your own brainwashing process. Now, I never set out to brainwash myself, but when I look back on my history, there were definitely tangible things that I did that ultimately put me on this path to success. And what do I mean by that? Well, when I go a layer deeper, the way I became successful was because I got over my fear of putting myself out there. And today I collectively have an audience of over 400,000 people, which is equivalent to 3 of the world's largest stadiums. Kind of frightening, but also kind of incredible. I would have never been able to achieve this level of comfortability and this level of visibility if it weren't for the tips that I'm about to share in today's video. This video was inspired by Layla Hormozi, whose video has over 1 million views, and she really dug deep into her weight loss story. But for me, my big blocker was my fear of putting myself out there. Maybe you can relate. Today, you might see polished Elise on my online channels, but I've experienced it all. I have choked on air while being interviewed live on Canada's largest morning radio show. I have held myself back because of some unsavory stalker attention. And honestly, I never let go of that feeling I got in high school of being an ugly duckling, always being picked last, and boys never being interested in me. So what helped me get through those lows when I could have just given up entirely? I've been an entrepreneur for over 10 years, and there were many lows where I could have just given up, but I didn't because of what I'm going to share today. So what helped me get over my low experiences when I could have just given up entirely? The first was I signed up for improv classes. Now, this was back in 2011. After I'd done that on-air radio interview where I basically choked on air, the host turned to me, they asked me a question, and my heart just jumped up into my throat. I could barely squeak out a word, like it was impossible. And I walked out of the studio thinking, what the heck? I'm studying to become a broadcast journalist, and I can't even speak live on air when I'm given the opportunity. It really freaked me out. So I signed up for Second City's improv classes while I was still a university student, and I was scared. I never intended to be funny, but what I found was that the improv classes were such a huge permission to just let go. Especially being a type A control freak like me, having permission to let go was so freeing, and it actually became addicting. I ended up doing improv classes for an entire year, and it culminated at the end of the year where I performed on the Second City stage. It was a lot, but it was amazing. So if you also struggle with reacting in a way that you want to when you're put on the spot, whether it's on a Zoom call, on a sales call, filming reels, whatever it might be, I'd highly recommend to check out improv. Again, there's no pressure to be funny, but you're going into improv to build up that muscle of learning how to react on the spot and not being worried about being perfect or prepared. I still use the skill of improv today at 36 years old while running my online business. And in fact, I'm such a huge fan of improv that in some of my programs, I will actually bring in an improv teacher to help my students also start learning that skill because it is such an important skill that translates amazingly well to business. The second thing I did to brainwash myself to success happened in 2011. I was going through this really intense personal period. My parents were going through a divorce, and I was working with this therapist who was really helping me to build up my confidence. And working with this therapist, she had me write a reminder in my phone, and I set an alarm so that every day it popped up. And I actually just found this reminder the other day. And when I read it, I thought, wow, that is a pretty good description of who I've become as an online entrepreneur with my Elise Dharma business. So let me read you what this was. Who I am is a confident, bright, shining star who is curious and a voice to be heard, decisive, unstoppable, and is confidently alive, who always inspires others to live to their potential. Now, when I started this business, my intention was not to inspire people to live to their potential. But over the years, I have received probably hundreds of messages, DMs, emails from my students, and that is the sentiment they've expressed to me. They have felt inspired to change their Instagram, grow their business, boost their sales, put themselves out there through video, I have seen that effect that's happened on people, and it's all because I was rooted in myself in trying to build my own confidence in putting myself out there. Once I did put myself out there, that message, that energy spread to others. Does that make sense? If it does, or if you like this concept, go ahead and write your own message to yourself, set it as a reminder on your phone, and set it so that it pops up every single day, and you're gonna be reminded of that message on the daily. The third thing I did to brainwash myself was not use my real name. Elise Dharma is not my real name. It's a version of my real name. In fact, Elise is my middle name. My first name is the same as, I would say, the world's largest, most popular pop star back in 2000. You can debate who you think that is in the comments. So Elise is my middle name, and Dharma is a version of my last name. My last name is actually Dharmanin. But growing up, I knew that my last name would trip people up all the time. So when I started my online business, I actually worked with a business coach who recommended that I use a shortened version of my name. So we landed on Elise Dharma. And what's happened since then is Elise Dharma has become an entity and a separate brand in and of herself, separate from who I am as a person. Elise Dharma is that character that I turn into when I'm in business or work mode. And then when I turn the camera off and I leave my office, I can go back to who I want to be. Now, this isn't to say that Elise Dharma is a false version of myself, but what it does, especially for me as an introvert, it creates a separation from my business life and my personal life. I can turn it on to be Elise Dharma, just like I am right now. I'm speaking with more energy. I'm really trying to reach you through the camera more than I would if we were having a coffee. To me, that's the difference. I am bringing the Elise Dharma energy to the table, and when I turn my camera off, I can go back to being who I am, Brittany. This is similar to Beyonce's alter ego, Sasha Fierce. We know that when Beyonce gets on stage, she's channeling Sasha Fierce. And again, that separation is actually empowering. What would Sasha Fierce do? What would Elise Dharma do? The answers to those questions are different than when you're not in those alter egos. So for you, you might not need to create a new brand name for yourself, but create a alter ego name for yourself that you can step into when it's time for you to perform. The fourth thing I did to brainwash myself to success is related to the last point I shared. And I did this without intentionally doing it, but when I look back, I can see how impactful it was. When I launched my first website of the Elise Dharma brand in 2016, I just pulled some old travel photos of myself and I put them up there. But it felt a little blah, and it felt a little scary still to share that website link with my friends and family. So what I did was I booked a photo shoot. And in that photo shoot, I became 4 different characters. One was Carmen Sandiego, another was a travelpreneur, kind of like my version of a boss babe. The third was a tourist, and the fourth was a pirate because I had an extra costume kicking around, and why the heck not? I then relaunched my website with these character versions of myself, and again, it was just one more layer of my shield or my protection to be able to put myself out there. I had created these characterized versions of Elise Dharma, and it was a lot more fun and freeing to step into those character roles than just be who I was. A freelancer, a digital nomad, an agency owner, a traveler. All those things were fine, but I felt a lot more empowered and I felt a lot more confident when I was channeling one of my characters. The fifth thing I did to brainwash myself to success was sort of an inner dialogue that I would have with myself every time I was faced with something scary. So let's say I was invited to speak in front of a live audience. Well, a part of me would actually want to say no, because why put myself through that stress? And so this is the conversation I'd have with myself. Elise, what is the worst thing that could happen? Sure, my slides might not work, or the power goes out, or I trip on the stairs, something like that. But truly, the worst thing that could actually happen is I would die from that experience, right? That is literally the worst thing that could happen to any one of us. And then the second question I'd ask myself is, what's the likelihood of me dying from trying this experience? And then I would say, okay, Elise, you got it. Yeah, I'm not gonna die from speaking on stage to 100 people. And with that mentality, it sort of took the pressure off a little bit. And then I would go forward and try that new experience, knowing that the worst case scenario likely wasn't gonna happen. This mentality got me to do some pretty scary things over the years, but each scary thing stacked on top of each other. For example, I was invited to speak at a co-working space in Bali called Hubud back in about 2017, and I did that. Then I hosted a meetup at Teachable's New York office where I asked my audience to hang out with me, and I was so afraid that no one would show up, but people actually did. Then I went on to host 2 of my very own retreats, one in Lisbon and one in Bali, and again, I was afraid that no one would want to come, but they actually did. People flew around the world to meet me in an exotic location, hang out with me. It was wild. I also hosted workshops for later multiple times. I put myself out there to meet some famous people in my space, and I ultimately spoke on stage at Social Media Marketing World. This was a goal that I set for myself back in 2018 when I attended the conference. And then in 2021, I was invited to be a speaker. I was nervous about this for months leading up to it. And when I got on stage, I looked around and I saw that it was a room of about 400, maybe 500 people. And that mentality of what's the worst that's gonna happen? I could die. Am I gonna die? No. That mentality washed over me, and I actually had an amazing time on stage. I realized that on a daily basis, I reach hundreds of thousands of people. And yet I was so afraid to speak to a few hundred people. That really put it into perspective for me. So think about that the next time you're worried that you only have 100 Instagram followers. The 6th thing I did to brainwash myself to success was actually a journaling practice. Now, don't worry, I'm not gonna tell you to get up at 5 a.m. and journal for 30 minutes every day. I am the world's most inconsistent journaler, but I wrote something in 2019 and then I found it again in 2021 and it blew my mind because I did this one journal prompt. I'm gonna find it right now. I wrote this in 2019, but I was pretending that it was already 2020. So I started off with, this time last year, I was a different person. And now I went on to describe how I saw my life being in 2020. And now I am making $87,000 a month in revenue, where at least $50,000 each month is staying in the business. I'm paying myself $10,000 a month personally, and I've saved up over $100,000 in the bank. As you can see, I got right to the money right away. And when I found this entry in 2021, my business was doing not $87,000 a month, it was doing hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. Yeah, it was crazy. And we were saving a ton of money in profit, and I was paying myself about $8,000 a month. I didn't personally have $100,000 saved up, but I was saving that in my business bank account. So I was pretty close to these numbers. I'm using that money to buy my first home or investment property. I'm living in warmth in Southern Europe, Spain, Italy, Portugal, or Malta. Now, when I found this journal, I was literally packing my bags, like all my belongings in Toronto, and I was moving to Barcelona, Spain. So when I read that, I was like, oh my God, I'm actually doing this. And at that time, I did not have my first home or investment property, but a few months after moving to Spain, my partner and I did buy a home together. I have an amazing remote team who runs the business as if it's their own. They are so happy and grateful for their roles and being able to contribute to the company. That was really important to me. I wanted people to work with me who loved what they did. I can't speak for my team members, but when I have the privilege of working with people for multiple years on end, I think I'm pretty close to that. I'm engaged to Jalil and we're living near the beach. I was engaged when I read this. I got engaged in 2020 and we were moving to Barcelona. I spend about 3 to 4 hours a day working, mostly team check-ins, coaching calls, and vision planning and execution. My business is mostly courses with small coaching experiences. I would say that at this time, I was working more like 6 to 8 hours a day, but the description of my day-to-day was pretty good. My business today is mostly digital products and courses with small coaching experiences here and there. So that is accurate, even to this day. So that was my journal entry that I wrote in 2019. And again, when I found it 2 years later, it almost described my life that I was living to a T. So use that same prompt to start that exercise of envisioning your future life. And I know I said at the beginning of this video that I wasn't going to mention the word manifestation, but a lot of the things that I shared, including that journaling practice, could fall under that umbrella. And again, I'm someone who loves tactical and tangible things. Without getting too woo-woo, these were the exercises and mindset strategies that really worked for me. Now, if you found this video helpful or maybe inspiring, you might be interested in my story of how I became a self-made millionaire in just 12 months. Watch this video next.